I've been sitting in the Pennsylvania State Archives for 6 hours, going through agricultural surveys, extension reports, and building records, and I need to tell you what I found. What I found in a Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission record from 2010 changes everything you think you know about cooling a house. One number kept staring back at me. 29 degrees. I want you to hold that number. Not later, now. 29 degrees is the measured gap between outside air and inside air recorded at Zion National Park's Passive Cooling Visitor Center using ancient airflow logic instead of conventional compressor cooling. That number sounds absurd. It sounds like internet junk. It isn't. It is a real performance result tied to the same physical principle Persian builders used in Yazd, and the same logic Pennsylvania farm families kept using long after mechanical air conditioning took over the market. So I stayed with the number. I kept digging. Then I found Lancaster Plain records showing spring houses supporting dairying and food preservation around 1800, stone, shade, moving air, water. Then I found the Department of Energy history of home cooling, Frigidaire room coolers in 1929, safer refrigerants in 1930, window units in 1932. Markets opening, standards hardening, money consolidating. The pattern was clean. Traditional cooling stayed where people still trusted walls, shade, water, and patience. Mechanical cooling spread where products, standards, and finance started talking to each other. Same summer, same heat. Two completely different futures. One kept your house livable with airflow and evaporation. The other sold that same relief back to you every month. Then another number appeared. 4. That was the energy ratio hiding behind the older method. 4 units of cooling effect for 1 unit of electrical input if you used moving air and evaporation correctly. Not laboratory fantasy, not backyard theater, real physics, measurable physics. And once you see that ratio, you stop asking whether this works and start asking why the average homeowner was trained to think a compressor is the first step instead of the last resort. I kept turning pages. USDA bulletins, housing manuals, engineering timelines, preservation reports. The older system never vanished because it stopped performing. It vanished because standardized products scale better than local wisdom. A corporation can invoice a sealed machine. A utility can meter it. A contractor can replace it. A lender can recognize it. But a shaded window, a wet pad, a cross breeze, and a stone wall do not create the same revenue trail. That is the part buried in plain sight. Here's what the evidence shows. And here's why nobody was supposed to find it. You can turn an ordinary fan into a real low-energy cooling system by using the oldest climate control principle on Earth, moving hot air through wet media before it reaches your body. Done correctly, that can cut the incoming airstream by 12 to 18 degrees, while using a fraction of the electricity of compressor cooling. The impossible number is this: 1/4. That is the energy share modern evaporative cooling can use compared with central air. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago. Stay with me. Because what I found in Lancaster County uses the same physics the Persians used to cool desert buildings more than 2,000 years ago. The science is brutally simple. Water absorbs heat when it evaporates. Your body already knows this. Sweat cools you because changing liquid into vapor pulls heat from your skin. A fan only moves hot air. Add evaporation in front of that fan, and the air loses sensible heat before it reaches you. That is why this works. The Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, through the Building America Solution Center, lays it out plainly. Modern evaporative coolers commonly reach 75% to 93% cooling effectiveness. Thick media can hit 90% or better. Indirect and direct combinations can exceed 95%. The same resource states that evaporative systems can use about 1/4 as much energy as central air conditioners. That is not a tiny gain. It is a category shift. Think about your car radiator. Air moving across a wet surface carries heat away faster than still air ever can. The same thing happens here, except the heat leaves with water vapor instead of staying trapped in metal. In practical terms, you are getting roughly 4 units of cooling effect for every 1 unit of electrical input, versus 1 unit of useful relief from a fan pushing untreated hot air. That effective coefficient of performance is why the trick feels bigger than the parts. And once you understand that, the scam becomes obvious. You were taught to think cooling begins with compressors, refrigerants, and sealed boxes. It doesn't. It begins with phase change, airflow, shade, and exit paths. If the air cannot leave, the system stalls. If the pad cannot stay evenly wet, the system underperforms. If the incoming air is already saturated, the method loses range. That is why dry heat loves this trick, and humid heat demands better airflow discipline. But the rule never changes. Hot air meets wet surface, heat leaves, skin notices. The Persians didn't read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. Farm families in Pennsylvania did the same. So can you. That gap represents billions of dollars in equipment, replacement, and service every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. I first felt the difference in East Hempfield Township, just outside the tourist version of Lancaster most people think they know. I stepped into a stone outbuilding at the back of a working farm on a 91-degree afternoon. The temperature fell on my skin before my eyes adjusted. No compressor hummed, no condenser rattled. I heard bees, boots on gravel, and water moving under a plank floor. Eli stood beside a shelf of Crocs and told me, in the plainest possible way, that summer air only wins when you let it rush in fast and leave slow. He had spent 4 generations watching families cool milk, butter, and bodies with some combination of shaded masonry, wetted cloth, and controlled airflow. His people carried that knowledge from the Palatinate and Canton Burn into Pennsylvania, then kept it because it solved the problem cheaply. That was the part that stuck with me. Nobody there talked like they were preserving a lost secret. They talked like they were refusing nonsense. Eli was not romantic about any of it. He told me a hot room is usually a badly managed room. Too much sun, not enough shade, air entering without a plan for leaving, water sitting where it should have been moving. He said families had been correcting those mistakes since his great-grandfather's time, long before anybody started calling basic heat control an innovation. That knowledge never disappeared. It was written out of the manual. It was waiting. And a 1921 USDA Farmer's Bulletin on farm dairy houses confirms exactly how central cooled outbuildings remained. Go back farther, and the pattern gets even harder to ignore. In ancient Egypt, builders were already using high openings and wetted surfaces to drag heat out of occupied space more than 3,300 years ago. In Persia, wind catchers and qanat-fed air channels pushed moving air past subterranean water and through towers shaped for pressure change. In Yazd, one surviving wind catcher at Dawlatabad rises 33 meters above the garden and still works. Then look west. Roman houses used courtyards, thick masonry, shaded pools, and vertical ventilation to bleed heat away before it reached sleeping rooms. Different empire, different materials. Same answer: move the air, cool the air, store coolness in mass, release heat upward. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate and Canton Burn to Pennsylvania 200 years ago and kept building it because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. That matters more than it sounds. When 2 distant cultures solve the same climate problem with air movement, shade, water, and mass, you are not looking at folklore. You are looking at engineering before the language of engineering hardened into textbooks and licensing boards. The break came in 1930. General Motors and DuPont formed Kinetic Chemical Company to produce Freon for Frigidaire's expanding refrigeration and room cooling market. Safe, non-flammable refrigerant turned cooling into a mass consumer product. That decision protected a future worth staggering money. Every window kept shaded, every room cooled by evaporation, and every house designed to flush heat naturally threatened years of equipment sales, chemical sales, and service calls. The suppression did not happen with one villain in one dark room. It happened through standards. It happened through financing. It happened through manuals that decided what counted as modern. The HUD History of Minimum Property Standards says the 1958 edition became a de facto building code and specified allowable building methods, materials, components, and finishes. FHA approval became paramount to market acceptance. Once a national manual favors standardized products, builders stop learning local climate tricks. They stop teaching them. They stop pricing them. Then the Allies locked arms. Carrier sold the machinery. Frigidaire, inside General Motors, sold the household dream. Magazine culture sold cooled modernity through appliance advertising in titles like Better Homes and Gardens. FHA-backed standards pushed prescriptive uniformity. Local code groups copied those provisions. Manufacturers got national markets. Everybody on that chain made money when your house needed purchased cooling instead of orientation, mass, moisture, and airflow. And once schools start teaching that purchased cooling is normal, a second loss begins. Builders stop practicing window placement. Homeowners stop trusting night air. Inspectors stop asking whether an exit path exists for heat. The language changes first, then the habits change. Then the market acts like it invented the only answer. Not because it failed, because recurring revenue scales better than self-reliance. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, builder habits, and code culture. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable, and the pattern never stopped. Open Secrets records show the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $964,622 on federal lobbying in 2022. That money was not charity, it was influence. Standards, refrigerants, efficiency rules, and code language all shape what gets sold, what gets approved, and what never reaches your estimate sheet. Nobody told you, not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you the upgrade. The HVAC systems market in the United States was estimated above $31.7 billion in 2025. Every low-cost alternative installed is a machine, refill, or service contract that never gets sold. Read that again in plain English. If you cool one room with water, airflow, and a fan you already own, somebody loses a sale. If you cool 3 rooms with shade, night flushing, and a weekend of work, somebody loses several. That is why these ideas survive as family habits and local memory instead of leading the average estimate sheet. They work too well at the wrong price. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people starting fresh, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to rip out your existing system. You need a weekend. Start with the fan you already own. A standard 20-inch box fan is enough. Build a shallow front chamber from 1/2-inch foil-faced polyiso board or corrugated plastic so the face measures 22 inches wide, 22 inches high, and 4 inches deep. Seal every seam with HVAC foil tape. Then cut a front opening that holds an evaporative pad measuring 18 inches by 18 inches by 2 inches. Use treated cellulose media, not household sponge, because airflow dies when pore size collapses. Set the chamber over a reservoir. A polypropylene tote around 23 inches long, 16 inches wide, and 12 inches deep works well. Line the contact points with EPDM rubber or silicone so vibration stays low. Drop in a submersible pump rated between 80 and 130 gallons per hour. Run 3/8-inch vinyl tubing up to a 1/2-inch Schedule 40 PVC header across the top of the pad. Drill 1/16-inch holes every 1.5 inches so the water falls evenly. Keep the pad vertical. Keep the return open. Keep the bottom edge 1 inch above the reservoir lip so water drains cleanly instead of splashing back into the fan. Put the whole unit in a shaded window or directly in front of one, with the fan pulling air through the wet pad, never pushing from behind loose material. Then crack a second window on the opposite side of the room by 2 to 4 inches. That exit path matters more than people think. Use the low fan speed first. Let the pad saturate for 90 seconds. In dry summer air, the supply stream drops fast. On a 95-degree day, this setup can push air that feels 12 to 18 degrees cooler at the outlet and bring a small bedroom down by 6 to 9 degrees. The pump uses little power. The fan does the rest. In many houses, that means roughly 98 to 140 watts instead of a compressor dragging thousands. Placement decides whether you love it or hate it. Keep the intake on the shaded side of the house after 11 a.m. if you can. Put reflective curtain material or low-E radiant foil in the sunniest glass nearby so the room is not being reheated while you cool it. If the room is larger than 180 square feet, use 2 smaller exit cracks instead of 1 big opening. If the pad dries at the corners, reduce fan speed or add 4 more 1/16-inch holes to the header. The costs stay almost insulting. The pad runs $18 to $32. The pump runs $12 to $22. The tubing and PVC run $7 to $14. The polyiso board runs $18 to $26. The tote runs $9 to $18. Tape, screws, and sealant add $11 to $19. Even with a better pad frame, you stay under $131 total if you already own the fan. One warning: the exhaust window is not optional. A sealed room causes humidity buildup, slower evaporation, and that swampy feeling people blame on the method instead of the mistake. Do not swap the cellulose pad for thick cotton towels. Cotton sags, blocks airflow, and breeds odor faster. Clean the reservoir once a month in heavy use. Replace the pad every 3 to 5 years. Flush mineral scale once a season with diluted white vinegar. One Saturday morning gets it built. 40 minutes gets it cleaned. If you live where humidity runs higher, you do not abandon the method. You tighten it. Run the unit during the hottest, driest window of the day, usually late morning through early evening, and pair it with a shaded room instead of the whole house. Use a thinner 1-inch pad if your fan struggles, and keep the cross vent stronger so moisture never stalls indoors. In shoulder seasons, skip the pump and use the same box as a plain window fan for night flushing. Same frame, same fan, 2 jobs. You can also scale it without changing the idea. A second pad wall on the intake side raises contact time. A deeper 6-inch chamber smooths airflow. A small inline float valve keeps the reservoir level stable. If mineral content is brutal, use a cheap sediment pre-filter on the feed line and a teaspoon of citric acid during cleanout. None of that changes the principle. It only makes the principle steadier. The goal is not to imitate a compressor. The goal is to make a room feel human again for almost nothing, using parts you can touch, clean, and understand in one afternoon. That is why people kept this knowledge. It is repairable. It is visible. It answers to you. And if you think that sounds too simple, good. Simplicity is the point. You can inspect every inch, hear every change, and fix every failure with your own hands. No refrigerant license, no proprietary board, no sealed mystery. Just airflow, water, temperature, and a decision to stop confusing complexity with intelligence. That matters to you. Your window AC costs $289 to $469 to buy, $31 to $58 per month to run in peak season, and lasts 8 to 12 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $131 total. It lasts 10 to 15 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellar cooling, lime wash walls, gravity-fed water, I've put it all in one place, step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. It does not have a public name yet. The link is in the description. But stay here, because what Eli built is the part nobody is talking about yet. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your average July electric bill, or the cooling trick your grandparents used in the comments. Tell me whether your air is dry, humid, or somewhere in between. I read every single one. And your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals about keeping a room warm through winter using nothing but lime, brick, and air gaps. The technique uses nothing but clay plaster, radiant foil, and ordinary lumber. And the report from 1946 that proves builders knew about it decades before selling you the expensive version. You're not going to want to miss that one.